And welcome to everybody here. Welcome to our panelists. So before we get started, I want to first thank our panelists, Nia, Donna, and Mary, for engaging in this conversation with me. And I also want to just say a couple of things. Number one is this is not your traditional panel discussion, okay? So Nia and Donna and Mary are our kind of like solidified panelists for tonight. But this is actually a group discussion. So if you're feeling called to respond to a question, drop it in the chat. Come unmute it, right? When there's time. Really engage with us. We want to be in dialogue with one another. Also, this is not a conversation where I have an established pre list of questions. I do have some questions to prompt you all, but this conversation is going to be fluid, and I'm going to invite you all to help shape this conversation alongside me. So that's first and foremost. The second thing I'd like to say is that this meeting is being recorded. So Natasha did give us a recording disclaimer right before the recording began. And that means also that this recording will go on Ujima's YouTube page, maybe clips of it may end up other places. And so just be careful if you do want to offer something into this space. We don't want you docs. We're living in some interesting times, right? So just only say things that you want to say. Represent yourself in the way that you want to be represented, and we'll make sure that is reflected in the recording. And the last thing I'll say is Ray, as the moderator of this conversation, the things that come out of this conversation, at least that I offer to the space, are reflections of my own and not of Boston Ujima Project Incorporated. And I think that folks who are speaking and decide to speak should make that claim as well. And without further ado, let's get started. Hello, panelists.
Hi,
Hi.
Ray.
Hi. How's everybody doing? Doing
We're
all right?
good.
Some
Yeah.
thumbs up. All right, loosen up. We're ready for this conversation. All right, so let's jump right on in. And I'm gonna ask the first question, which for you all maybe might seem a little shallow or it might seem like, whatever. But I just want to hear from you all. First and foremost, what does power mean to you all? Like, what is power? Just let's ground ourselves there and this is your own individual kind of explanation of it, but what is power? And some of the things, if I can prompt you just a bit, is to think about maybe some examples in which maybe you've had power and you were able to exercise that. What does that mean in the context of power? Maybe think about some examples in which power was enacted upon you, right? Was that good? Was that bad? Was it neutral? And maybe you have a few different examples for each. And yeah, what does power maybe look like for Ujima? What does like building power look like? So starting just fresh out the gate, and other folks who are in the audience, to be thinking about that for yourselves, feel free to drop it in the chat. What is power? And I am actually going to start with Mary. Mary, can you answer that for us?
For sure. Thank you, Ray. Such wonderful questions and great place to start. When I think of power off rip, I think of the ability to influence people, the ways that people are able to control or move or dictate certain situations. But also like this idea that power um is something that you can plug into, that anybody can plug into, that it's not certain people, like it's not like we don't certain people don't have access to power. I think what's often under when people think of power, that it's often understood as there are these people in power, and you can only have power if you are a person who is in a certain position, particularly in government or in a very like rich position, wealthy position, a position that holds institutional um power. But I like to think of power as a lot as our theme is this month, grasping at the root. Like power can really come from the people, power can come from our networks. When I think of the most powerful people in my community, my spaces, those are not necessarily the politicians who may be able to make certain decisions, but really the people who are able to influence those decisions, the people who are able to influence the thought, the attitudes, the the energy of those around us. And so I really like to think of power as something that's really grounded in people, and in our networks. Um, and when I think of times where I felt powerful, it's because of the people in the community that I've been in, and like the love and care that we have for each other that allows us to tap into that people power.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mary. So I'm hearing something around people power. All right. All right. Let's hear from Nia. Nia, let's hear from you. What is power for you?
Sure, and thank you. Let me just do a audio test real quick. Can y'all hear me through my mask? All right, excellent. So I actually don't think what I have to say is much different from Mary's on this. If
Mhm,
I try to think, when thinking of this question, if I try to boil it down to the most basic essence of what I think power is, I would say I think power is the ability to do
mhm,
and the ability to influence what is done.
mhm,
And so I hear resonance when Mary talks about influence, for example. And when I think about that most basic essence of what power is, I think the thing that's important for me to say right now is if we're talking about just that, then hopefully we understand that power is multifaceted, that so to Mary's point, there is not only one kind of power. Power
mhm,
does not look only one way.
mhm,
So power is multifaceted. Power is derived from a bunch of different types of sources. So again, the resonance that I hear is that it doesn't just come from one place.
mhm,
Power looks different. Power takes on all sorts of shapes. Power takes on all types of sizes. And so when I think of that, then I do believe truly that everybody is powerful.
Mhm.
mhm,
Um, that every person and every group of people is powerful. And within one person can exercise different types of power at different times. So even within a person, it may not always look the same. And I think that's the same for a group of people as well. And even in a given moment, a person or a group of people can be exercising different types of power at the same time. And I think a lot of times our work, and again, I hear some resonance with what Mary has said, is actually a lot of us uncovering or excavating power, different types of power that we did not know we had
mhm,
for individuals and for groups of people as well.
mm. Thank you, Nia. Thank you. So I'm hearing power doesn't come from a source. I'm hearing something about resonance here. So people having to rock with that, rock with the idea, right? And the ability to like do something, to take action, whatever that action may be. Thank you so much. Donna, let's hear from you. What is power to you?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that's been said. I think that what's been said brings me back to is sort of the way I think about the work that I do, which is, I say anti-racism and DEI just because I don't know what else to say. But
Yeah.
but with that, we often look at the four areas of power, which are the four dimensions of doing that kind of work, which is there's personal power, there's the internal, what comes from inside of us. There's
Mm-hmm.
the interpersonal, there's
Mm-hmm.
the institutional, and there's the cultural. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to stay with the cultural because I think that um, that whole thing is defined by the culture that you're grounded in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a place where when you're thinking about power, you're really thinking about what are the values, the purpose, the vision that's holding you to have power on all those levels.
Mm-hmm. Mm. That's really, really good. Okay, so I'm hearing us begin to define these four kind of areas where power can be held, right? And this is bringing up something for me. And before I ask that question, though, I want to see, is there anybody in the audience? Is there anybody in the chat or that wants to come unmuted to talk about what is power for them, right? Are we resonating with what's been said? Are we thinking about other forms of power that we want to bring to the light? So I'll just give a few seconds for people to kind of sit with that. And if you'd like to add something to this conversation, please feel free. Just holding space for that. And also, the chat is always open. We are live, okay? So, if there's anything that comes up as we're having this discussion, please feel free to add it to the chat. And of course, when I make the invitation, come unmuted. Um, so yeah, I'm hearing a lot about, or I'm hearing a bit about these, like, there are different forms of power, right? And so for me, so this is a two-part question, right? Is there a form of power that you lean to in your personal work, that you think kind of gets us closer to any type of liberatory world or well-being? Or how do you see these different forms of power, the four that Donna mentioned? So I'm hearing personal, I'm hearing interpersonal, I'm hearing cultural, and I'm hearing institutional. How do we see those working in concert with one another, right? And not just to get the thing that we want individually, right? But to folks who are more justice oriented, right? How do we see those forms of power working in concert with one another to achieve more justice, to achieve more equity? And I don't want to just use the buzzwords here, right? But we as a group right here, we don't have an explicit this is what like liberation means, right? So in your world, right, how do these forms of power work in concert to get to kind of your peak vision of liberation?
Well, for me, uh, I thought this was such a big, a big topic. It's so big. What is power? But I feel like again, going back to the way I think of my work, there's something at the center. Like I said, a circle is a symbol for power. So there's
Mm,
something at the center that's holding the individual, that's holding relationships, that's holding institutions, that's holding our worldview. So it's a very complex thing. And I used to talk about this years ago, that that's cultural. So in some cultures, the center is not an individual. The center could be God. The center could be nature. The center could be any named thing that's holding that together, right? Could
mm,
be money and power, So whatever, I just feel like that's the complexity of it for me. It's just
mhm,
how it's so encased and connected, and teasing that out is the work.
mm, mhm. That's really good. And before any of our other panelists speak or any of our other audience members speaks, one of the other things that I'm thinking about in relation to the first question, to just be thinking about, do they all need to be happening at the same capacity at the same time? Do these forms of power, does it ebb and flow, right? And what is your personal measure for when to pull which levers, which power levers? If you have ever had that kind of opportunity to do so.
You seem ready to speak.
Oh, I'm just
You, my fault. I didn't mean to put you on you. See, power, influence.
right. All right. I'm trying to think of this question, Ray, because I think you asked um I'm interpreting as you've asked really kind of three different types of questions in
Mhm,
response to the in response to what Donna laid out. So I've been trying to think of this question in terms of what I personally lean to when. So I've just been trying to reflect
mhm,
on how I find I move most days. And I would say for me, I think there's definitely a big interpersonal element to I guess how I move and exercise power, um, both in terms of thinking about influence and also in terms of thinking about um, what might actually just be a natural orientation towards kind of working with others and cooperation and group work as opposed to individualism. On the influence side, it has been my experience that the door to kind of embracing, I'm thinking about influence in the sense of conversion or persuasion or the ability to embrace new ideas. And it is my experience that the smoothest path is through genuine relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It's been my experience that um, I will more readily, and those that I know will more readily accept new information, accept challenges, accept questions from people that we trust
Mm-hmm.
for one reason or another than from a kind of distant, disconnected source. And that's not always true because then also we know that there's this whole thing with like, parasocial relationships that we have with like celebrities and, people we don't really know, but we feel
Mm-hmm.
like we do. So I'll put that in a different category. But I think in terms of just kind of more everyday people, it's my sense that trust that has already been built up allows people to, again, like I said, take in new information, um, manage questions and manage challenges than with those who are not trusted. So for me, then interpersonal is very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then also for me, I'll stop and let someone else go. There are some other thoughts that I'm having. The other thing is also just on a level of basic respect for human beings. I think that that's also important. And
Mm-hmm.
I say basic, and it is oddly enough, I think something very powerful in a society that actually does not respect um, human beings' inherent value. So something that should be a given isn't, and so then it does actually, I think, it becomes very powerful when one is seeking to give people that basic respect and expects to also receive basic respect as a human being. So that lands me squarely in a lot of the interpersonal arena.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh,
No, that's really good. Thank you so much. And before I invite you, Mary, to kind of respond, Um, yeah, I'm also wondering then about this connection that Donna is bringing up around that something. Like, what is that something? For some people, it's spiritual. For some people, it's the universe or nature, whatever it is. And I'm wondering if that something that whatever that is that kind of holds or like where power kind of converges and meets. I'm wondering if that something has at least a part to do with like humanity or like just kind of our own just life, just like what is that something. That's just a question that I'm sitting with, right? um yeah, all right, Mary, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I think what's coming up for me as that something, I think a lot about all about love and how I really think
Mm,
having, to Nia's point, like seeing the deep respect and humanity of other people, and especially love for yourself, like having unconditional love for yourself and seeing that in other people and having that move you into action, I think has always been very important, at least in my life. And I think there's a kind of bravery that comes with that, that allows people to see beyond the fear, that I think stops people from believing that they're powerful, into moving into action, and doing that work. And I think what I've seen too as something that is powerful in communities and spaces, um, is not being afraid. I'm thinking about the protester at the Super Bowl, who was alone in that moment, but chose out of their deep commitment to their faith and love for humanity, to speak up and to be brave and to step into that moment of power. And so when you're asking us around how do we activate power, I think a lot of it is like to not be afraid, to lean into love and love for community and love for humanity, and to do that even if everybody else is against you. And I think that's what allows you to step into a powerful place, because people are like, oh, who's that? And I think that lets you lean into those interpersonal relationships, and really develop that community, that base, that wants to build power. But you can't be powerful alone. You have to have a base. You have to have community. Like that's also something I strongly believe in, that you need your base, you need your people.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna ask another question. I'm actually gonna offer this question to our audience first, to give our panelists some time to sit with this one.
Real
Um,
quick, Ray.
yeah.
Sorry, real quick. Someone did put something in the chat real quick. Dior
Oh,
put
yes.
belief to me in the chat.
Okay, believe to
I
me.
don't know if we want to invite Dior to say a little more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk about that? I'm sorry I missed that in real time, but what were you responding to?
Excuse me, sorry about that. It was you had posed a question around kind of like basically what power is rooted in. And Mary, actually, I appreciate your answer because you hit the nail on the hammer when I put in their belief. And the reason why I say that is because I'm drawing a blank, but if you all recall, back in like the 60s or 70s, the lady who stood in front of the army truck and stopped the army truck with her hand. She stood alone, and that became like a historically significant thing. It just goes to like what Mary was saying when she was saying like, I'm sorry, when they were saying like power is rooted in like a belief system of even if I'm alone, it can still change. But I also just wanted to kind of speak to how we had to really break away from the ideology of power because the way that power was introduced, it was introduced through fear. It was
Mhm.
introduced through us being ostracized, us not being able to speak out and say things because we were afraid to be alone. And so when you get into that belief system that, hey, I am powerful beyond measure, I can do this, I can stand up. I think there's power in death, which
Mhm.
kind of correlates to spirituality. There's power in education, there's power in wealth, but also coming from being a individual that comes from a poor ghetto in Detroit, power also came through, it did come through fear. You had people that were in your neighborhoods who were powerful, but they were powerful because they were feared. They did things for the community, but they were feared. But then you also had people who stood up against those individuals. And even though they stood alone, they still had power. So I was kind of just trying to say belief systems and correlating it to what both Mary, and forgive me for not remembering the other individual's name, but who related it to the four different categories of like interpersonal, personal, institutional, and culture.
Yeah, thank you. That was Donna for bringing that into space. Thank you so much, Dior, for bringing that. Wow. So I think that really leads me to my next question, right? So we talked a lot about how, and Mary kind of ended this with their statement around how power is something, there is kind of like a personal power, and that means one thing. When we think about like power, like at large, it is something that we need others for. It's not something that you do alone, right? So what happens, or what do you think is part of the resolve, or what do you think is part of, um, yeah, how do we navigate moments where we desire to be in community together? We desire to build power with one another. But our beliefs are different. Our beliefs are different. How do we handle that? How do we sit with that, right? Um, how do we come to an agreement? Is what yeah, and yeah, if we had all of the answers, we have it figured out by now, right? But just from personal experience, maybe, what are some moments where there was some tension in beliefs with people who you wanted to build with and you wanted to struggle with? But that struggle was there, that tension was there. And how did we move past that toward the end of building power with one another?
Just to kind of jump in there, I think that if the goal is common, because everybody's not going to believe the same thing, right? But if we're all working toward the same goal, it's easy to have conversation. And I think that's what's important about community. You know, I don't have to believe every single thing that you believe when it comes down to, even down to like personal details about things, religion, lifestyle, things like that. But if our goal is to where, because there's two quotes that come to mind. Without struggle, there's no progress.
Mhm.
Okay. And to me, that quote is basically the answer to that. It's like we have to struggle through these, we have to have these conversations so that we are able to move toward our common goal, which is liberation. Because at the end of the day, we are not free until we are all free. And I know power and freedom kind of go neck and neck with each other in the way that we're talking about it. But I do believe that when it comes down to it, I don't have to, you can tell me that the sky is pink, and I'll say, no, I think it's blue. We don't have to agree on that, but if we're both saying, well, we want to get to the sky, we can work toward that and have the difficult conversations along the way.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you
I
for
think
adding
we
that.
can do that as long as we believe in each other's right to exist. Right.
Mm.
So,
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
you know, I feel like, and I think that's the hard thing. It's like when you look at this country, it's like somebody was saying, it's like what Neil was saying. There are peoples who came here who didn't respect other peoples, and we're all here, right? So the society isn't just any one people's; it's all these peoples trying to create something together, whether they want to or not, right? So
Mhm.
how power works is grounded in that reality, right? So, and we each have our own um, history and culture and lived experience of what that means for us. And so, as long as we're allowing each other to exist, we can struggle with that. We can be in inquiry sometimes. We can be in conflict sometimes. It's it's healthy, right? But
Mhm.
if somebody doesn't want you to live, it's it's something else. And so, and which is, but I could go on about that. But it's just it's not it's not to blame the people because that's what they believe, right?
Mhm.
But we're in struggle.
Mhm. Yeah. Go
If I
for it.
can, yeah, add to that. Thank you, Donna. So if I could add to that, I think what I would say is, um, so Donna said conflict is healthy. So
Mhm.
my initial thought when you posed the question, Ray, was I don't know that disagreement is something that I would look to quickly move beyond.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's my sense that I appreciate the point about understanding who does not even respect you as a person. I think that's a
Mhm.
different conversation. I think at the point when you are not respected as a human being, we're not even talking about disagreement. And
Mhm.
and so I don't know that there's in that instance, I don't know that there's anything to get beyond. I would
Mhm.
say, I think then in that instance, our charge is to understand that, like really deeply at our gut, viscerally understand that.
Mhm.
Donna might disagree with me on this actually, but I would say, and then stop trying. That's me.
Mhm.
That's me.
Mhm.
Now, at the point in which we're not talking about disrespecting each other's humanity, but then we are talking about different types of disagreements, even if they are deep.
Mhm.
I then think my instinct is not to try to brush past it, try to pretend like it's not there, but my instinct is let's contend with each other. Let's
Mm-hmm.
hash it out respectfully. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that that is a skill set that writ large our society doesn't really have, that we probably need to build.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it seems like right now disagreements get put in the same category, and they might be in this category of you don't respect me as a human being, whatever the disagreement is. And so then we are not actually trying to really respectfully contend with each other. I think
Mm-hmm.
part of that is seeking to understand each other's perspectives genuinely, genuinely. And then I think deciding when is the proper moment for persuasion or conversion, which
Mm-hmm.
it's not always that moment. And when is it just not? When
Yeah.
is our task only to understand each other and
Mm-hmm.
that's it? So that's my
Mm-hmm.
thought.
Mm. Thank you so much, Nia. Mary?
I agree with what my fellow panelists have said. I I think at the starting point of conflict, I think if you're in community, if it's interpersonal, I think that makes sense. To give some background, I'm Ethiopian, and so my family, my people come from a struggle of like resistance, particularly against the Italians, and it wasn't a peaceful resistance. It wasn't kumbaya. It wasn't having a conversation and dealing with conflict. It was armed resistance. And so I do think that there are times and places where we don't talk about that as a form of power. And I would like to bring that into the space, but not also being mindful of like we need to be skilled, we need
Mhm.
to be strategic, we need to be in community and understanding the work that we're doing, because there's always a response, especially when you're against very powerful colonial imperialist forces, but also knowing that there's a rich history of resistance here in the United States as well that got people free, that got people rights, um, that got people that allowed has allowed us to be where we are today. And so I also don't want that to be hidden away or shy or have us be shy of speaking about that. But that is also something that like I know that resonates with me, and I think it's something for us to lean into sometimes. I think a lot about South Korea, when their government was going through a coup and folks weren't afraid um to stand up. A lady put, I believe it was a congresswoman or a senator or somebody put her hand up against the gun of a military official. And so just being mindful of how we have power within ourselves, and to not shy away from that too. And that there's a history of that as well.
Mm. No, that's great. That's great. And I'm hearing so many, I'm hearing so many juicy things here. Part of what I'm hearing is that like there's the power in the relationship, right? There's the interpersonal kind of power that is happening. And that one of the things that we need to do, especially if we're thinking about collective power or building up that kind of relational power, is that we have to be willing to be in struggle with one another. But a prerequisite to that is that we gotta see each other's humanity. Like we can't actually be struggling with one another if we don't believe that each other deserves to live and like have a fulfilling and self-determined life, right? Wow, that is good. So what I'm hearing is that we're getting to some just basics of like what needs to be present if we're going to be building some people power. And that is juicy. So my next question then, and I'm going to start with the panelists first and then invite our community members to join in. Um, but what are some other prerequisites then? Before we can even start the conversation about what needs to take place. So it and this is we haven't gotten to our answer here. We said some kinds of things about what power can be and what it means. So we want to be able to just do and make decisions about our own livelihoods, our own lives. We want to be able to do that collectively as a people, right? So we know that we gotta first just start with basic respect for each other's humanities. Um And that there's at some point a willingness to struggle, to be like, all right, this is your experience, this is mine. Let's see where they converge. Let's see where they touch and agree. Let's see where they don't, right? Um, but what are some other prerequisites or what are some other conditions that need to be in place, at least from your perspective, for real community kind of power building to take shape?
I'll go first on this one.
Mhm.
So, Ray, I think this takes me back to a second part of like your second question.
Mhm.
Back back back
Back,
in the
back.
day of this conversation,
Yeah.
where I wanted to talk about institutions,
Mhm.
which is another area that I think, you know, I lean into as well. Um, and I think Mary got into this a little bit, in talking about state. So Mary's last remark makes me think about state power, and
Mhm.
it
Mhm.
and so wanting to make the connection between, as what we have been saying, which is even if you act as an individual, you are not alone. So even in some of these instances where we see a person who seems to be alone, confronting a particular type of power, understanding that they are not, that they have a community behind them, whether we see that community or not.
Mhm.
Um, and so then in thinking about uh, collective power, group power, I do think it is very important that we build institutions that can contend for power with the institutions that currently exist.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I think that it is tempting a lot of times, I think, because the institutions that currently exist are inadequate, to think that we can ignore that area of work or that arena of work. But I think when we ignore that, there's a big part of the playing field, so to speak, that we are ceding to people who do not want us to live, who do not respect our humanity. And it's in I think we all know that there are certain institutions that set the parameters of our life. And we experience those parameters to different degrees depending on how our individual lives are organized, but they are still set.
Mhm.
And to me, if we want to live in the types of communities, societies, and worlds that we think are healthy for everybody, then we also need to be creating and controlling the institutions that set those parameters. Such that those parameters, if we're thinking about enclosure, for example, as a metaphor, we're pushing them further and further and further and further and further out,
Mhm.
so that we are able to actually walk around truly free. So I think our own institutions that we control, um, are, I don't know if I would say a prerequisite, because I also just wanted to kind of tap into what Dior said, which is in addition to kind of us uncovering and excavating our own power, part of our work is also unlearning about negative types of power that we've been indoctrinated with. So this notion of power that comes from fear and force and abuse. So I think there are ways in which we are exercising different types of power already. So that's why I wouldn't say a prerequisite.
Mhm.
Um, but I think for us to not feel like we're just spiraling historically, um, and we're kind of beating our heads against the wall. I think we need to again be creating and controlling our own institutions.
Thank you. And Nia, before I pass this on though, and I feel like I'm picking up what you're putting down. And
Mm-hmm.
question, are there one or two of those institutions that you can explicitly name? These are here, this is where we need some power.
I
I
think
can't,
Mary's trying to.
It's
is the
time.
time?
Oh, do you want to join the cooperative?
Uh, uh, I'm gonna kick it to Mary. Mary, I think wants to answer that question, Ray.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Is that what you were doing?
I just wanted to put a plug in for the Boston Ujima Project. That is one of these institutions that is trying to develop people power, and a cooperative solidarity economy in Boston, Massachusetts, and around the world. But
And
you know others.
yeah, and I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Right now we have people that are contending for governing power.
Mm,
I mean, I guess they have it, but they are contending for like a certain kind of complete non-democratic governing power. I would say that institution we need to control.
mhm,
And I would say a lot of people in that institution, I mean like broad, I mean
mhm,
system.
mhm,
Um, a lot of people on our side, if this harks back to where I said, you know, I think there are some arenas that we've ceded
mhm,
to people who think differently because we've said we don't want to fight in that arena. We think it's dirty to fight in that arena, um, for very understandable reasons. And I would say we have to stop being afraid to fight in those arenas. And we have to lay claim to those institutions and make them ours.
thank you. Thank
I
you.
wonder, and this is a really, I wonder, is it just fear that keeps us from doing that?
Mm,
It's like, I don't, I guess that's a real question I have. What does keep us from doing that? And
Mm,
how do we, how do we really learn together, what's holding us, what's holding us back? I think sometimes, I think I used to be focused really on the institution and that level of power.
mm,
I think now I'm more focused on individual power because I just feel like, it, and that's not totally true, but I just feel like there's a way that we're so much a part of this system in a way that even if we don't want to be,
mm,
that I just question how do we how do we take what we know from other places and bring it forth. I think some people do it, but people do it in such different ways, which has been Black people's whole history here, right? It's like we've lived in tyranny.
mhm,
Most of our existence has been
mhm,
what they're trying to put in place now. It's only since maybe the 40s that it sort of looked like it was different.
mm,
So, what lessons can we learn having lived with this kind of hidden, as they say, hidden empire?
mm,
What lessons do people who, and like Mary, have who bring another reality? It's like we're here, and here isn't just here, here's global, So I don't know. I just feel like there are things we have to figure out and keep working, but it's very, and I have to say my bias personally is complexity.
mhm, mhm,
And it's not good sometimes, sometimes you gotta get to the point. But,
mhm,
I'm continually asking the questions of,
mhm.
that's my personality,
mhm.
Same,
my power, power.
same, yeah. My
Yeah.
bias is complexity as well.
Okay. All right, y'all. This is I am there. Are there some folks in the space that want to speak?
Someone looked like they were thinking.
Uh-huh. The wheels were turning a
There
bit.
was a thoughtful sigh. Yeah.
Uh-huh. No, thank
Oh,
y'all. Thank
Oh,
y'all.
oh, he's
Yeah,
coming.
the mic is the
He's
mask is
coming.
coming off. I know you. Can you make a breakout?
Excuse me. I'll just say something real quick.
Come to
No,
the
no.
mic.
I didn't really want to get on, but here I am. I think just what you all are saying about complexity, I think a lot of people's bias is simplicity.
Hmm.
And I think that's why we're struggling with a lot of the issues we are today. A lot of people want, or the way I read that is a lot of people want to be told that this is the problem, this is the answer, and it's a really black and white thing, whereas in life, most things are shades of gray, right? So
Mhm.
it's not clear cut, but it's that idea of like simplicity. There's this person, there's this thing I can point to blame, that I can yell at, right? That I can express all that frustration, that I can direct it at, and that will make me feel better and that will change it. Whereas, I mean, that's like a momentary, temporary high, but that actually doesn't do anything to address or resolve the issues that people are in their feelings about.
Mhm. That's
Thank
good.
you,
Thank you so
Darius.
much, Darius. Y'all, this is juicy, and we are just getting started. One of the things that I want to acknowledge is that time's up. Time's up. This conversation is over. We're done. But I don't want to just rush us off this call. What I want to remind our folks at home is in the space is that this is the beginning of a year-long workshop series of these conversations around power, right? So any comments that you may have right now, feel free to drop them in the chat, but also like feel free to bring them with you for the rest of this year as we discover and excavate kind of all of these different areas, right? I want to thank Nia and Donna and Mary for being our panelists for tonight and sharing a little bit. And I'm going to ask you to share one more thing before you leave, but that's that.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you
Ray.
so much. Takes bow, takes curtsy, right? And I want to thank everybody for being here, right? Who chimed in, who were taking some time to listen because this is just hard stuff to be thinking about, and especially in the time we're in. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for engaging with us. I ask that you continue to dig in with us, be in community with us, see our humanity, and let's build some power together, right? And so the last question that I'm going to ask you all, and this is a little bit for me, maybe it'll be a little bit for you all, but like, what is your hope? What is your hope that people uncover at the end of this workshop series at the end of the year, right? We're talking about power, and this is our first conversation. What is your hope that people come to at the end of the year? And I like folks in the chat to share that as well. What is your hope through these conversations about power? What do you hope that we get to? And I'll hand it to you all.
I'm a lover. Will it come out? So it's not working. Oh, it did. Okay.
It did
And
it. It did it.
I just hope people understand love as a tool, deep abiding love for oneself and for community and for nature and the world, to drive them to move unafraid and to be powerful and to take the risks that they may not expect to take. I think that's really all I hope for.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I totally agree with Mary. I hope we come out of this knowing the power of love and knowing how powerful we are. Just believing that we have a lot of power.
And I'm gonna triple down. I'm gonna say I hope we come out literally verbatim what Mary said, and I'm just gonna add to that, love is a force.
Mm,
And then finally, I do just want to shout out what T'Chad put in the
yeah.
chat, said hard but necessary. So I think I also hope that what comes out of this workshop series is to understand that this is hard work and to not let that discourage us,
Hmm.
but to actually let that inspire us to lean into each other and to understand that none of us are alone and nothing is only on our shoulders.
Hmm.
We don't have to act alone. And really our next step should be leaning into each other and digging in for hard work. And love is powerful.
Oh, hey man, I'm seeing in the chat. People are posting in the chat. My hope is that we collectively realize our power. That's an ongoing process and impact progressive change. All right. My hope is that we learn to break down the fear of how power was introduced and carried out for centuries and build it up to where it's fully for love and the people. Wow, so rich. My mind is going in so many different directions. Thank you, Ray, and special guest at Boston Ujima Project. most appreciated. And my hope is for more people, including me, to get comfortable in the gray. Y'all, so we got some tough work to do, right? What we're uncovering in this moment is what we need to be doing, at least part of that, right? So my ask is that you all continue to struggle with us for the rest of this year and beyond as we try to figure this out for ourselves. Join us next week and every week after as we talk about power, miracles, and transformation.